What's up, my friend? Hey, welcome to the Grow Your Video Business podcast, videocast. This is the show for videographers and studio owners who want to learn how to get paid what they're worth, run a smarter business, and live a better life. My name is Ryan Coral from Studio Sherpas. I'm your host. Welcome to this episode. My guest today is Evan Bourcier. He's a filmmaker. The things that we talked about, I love his journey. Let me just say that. Like, this guy, I've known him back in the day when he started a Facebook group for filmmakers, and a lot has happened in his life over the past few years, and really, really vulnerable conversations. So I think you're going to get a lot out of it. A couple of the specific things that we talk about is how he went from being booked to being broke, and how Evan, he had 3 to 4 months of busy work on his calendar, and then he went to having nothing on his calendar, and what he did as a result. There's a book called The Infinite Game, and so this is a book that Evan has read. I haven't read it yet, but it's on my list now. But really, it's all about how we're short-sighted in the way that we define success, and really, really powerful stuff there. And then also the pros and cons of small projects versus six-figure projects. And I think that part of the discussion might surprise some of you. I want to also invite you, after the episode, maybe right now, I don't know, I want to invite you to the 5-day Grow Your Video Business Challenge. If you're at a spot in your video company where you need better clients, you're stuck, you're frustrated, I'm going to be showing up for 5 days. This is a totally free challenge, and I'm going to be teaching each of the 5 days, and I'm going to be sharing a challenge, or I'm going to be giving a challenge. And really the hope is that it motivates you to get the important work done inside of your business. We all can get bogged down in the minutia, the busyness, the details. And a lot of times that's not the stuff that moves our business forward. So the 5-day Grow Your Video Business Challenge, I've got a link below, or you can just go to studiosherpas.com/challenge. And let's get into the episode. But before we get into the episode, let's hear a quick word from our sponsor, Core Group. If there was one thing that could have ended my business 17 years ago, it would be because of the numbers. I hate accounting, taxes, W-9s, W-2s, W-40s, spreadsheets, all of that stuff. And I hate it mostly because I'm afraid of it. I'm just not great with numbers. If this sounds familiar, or if you're so new in your business that it's not even on your radar yet, you need Core Group. Core Group can help you create financial systems and tax strategies that you need so you can grow profitably, and they've been doing this for over 20 years. They become an extension of your team so that you can stay in your lane of expertise and then lean on them to help guide you along the way. For me, having a team of experts in my corner to help keep track of our books and just to make sure that we're budgeting for taxes appropriately, to have an actual strategy for our taxes and our accounting is priceless. And it allows me to sleep easier at night, knowing that I don't have to be an expert in that arena. If you want to avoid surprises in your video business, and you want experienced help building a plan for the future that you want, both professionally and personally, head over to studiosherpas.com/core for more information. And when you're ready to set up a free consult with them, make sure to mention Studio Sherpas for a special discount too. Got your back. Get more out of your accountant. Go to studiosherpas.com/core. What's up, friends? Hey, yeah, thank you.
Sorry.
Welcome to the Grow Your Video Business podcast. I'm Ryan Coral, and with me today, you had this look, and it froze on the look, and I was like, oh, did I break something? Evan Bourcier is on the show. This is not his first time actually, technically, first time on the show, right? Same show, different name. Evan, what's up, man? Welcome to the show. Thanks for breaking up your vacation to be here with us today.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me. I've been listening to a lot of these. I was listening to some of them. I'm in Florida right now and was listening on the drive down, and we'll be listening again on the way back. So glad to get to be a part.
Do you remember when we were last together on this podcast?
I was trying to think about that. I really don't remember. I feel like it must have been a while ago, because I think it's when I was still doing a lot of the stuff I was doing at that point, and that was a few years ago. So it's probably like 3 or 4 years ago at this point.
Oh, baby. That's a while. Well, so Evan is an extremely talented DP, and recently has
shifted stuff in his business and his life. And talk a little bit. Tell us what does work look like for you today? What are you calling yourself, and all of that stuff?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and something that I'm honestly still working through a little bit. Depending, I don't want to rehash a bunch of stuff, but depending on whether or not you listen to our last interview, so I've sort of gone through a bit of a trajectory where, like, did the whole start out as just a guy with a camera trying to get paid to make pictures, sort of thing, and did weddings and events and one man band, and then started hiring crews, and so it was sort of a small production company, and then shot enough stuff that looked decent that I started getting called to do DP work, and so sort of leaned into that. And then, had this whole blip in my career where I was doing a lot of YouTube stuff and had a podcast and whatever else. Ended up really resetting a lot of things in my life hard after a while of that. Basically, came to the conclusion that I had gone too far too fast, I think, is maybe the way I put it, and didn't really have a good plan at the beginning, and was just sort of burnt out and had accomplished everything that I wanted and was pretty miserable, and had made most of the people around me pretty miserable in the process. And so I archived my big Facebook group, I shut down all my Patreon accounts, I unfollowed and everyone and disabled my Instagram, and really just took a time to reset myself, and decided, I'm going to just go back to focusing on freelance DP work. I'm going to take a break from a lot of the social media stuff, and I'm just going to sort of pay the bills, work on my health, work on my marriage, go to therapy. I lost like 80 pounds, and took a whole chunk of time doing all that. And so that basically was like what I was doing up until COVID hit. So
Mm.
early 2020, I was doing a lot of DP work, a lot of documentary work, weirdly, early in 2020, where I was working on this feature documentary in DC that was sort of pharmaceutically related. And then I was working on a feature documentary in Puerto Rico about Roberto Clemente. And it was when we were on our way back from Puerto Rico, we were in the airport lounge in, I forget where we were. We were in some American Airlines lounge, and that was when me, the producer and the director, found out that South by Southwest had been canceled. And that was sort of the, oh, this is going to be a big deal moment, because I think it was right on that edge where everyone was like, oh, there's this thing going on in China. And I had a job. The next job I had after that was a series of things for Hewlett Packard Enterprises. And we were supposed to go to Europe and Asia and North America. And, the conversation had been like, we're not going to China, so it's fine. And then South by Southwest got canceled. Hewlett Packard shut down all company travel, and no one was allowed to go anywhere. All the local work I had was like for upcoming events and conferences that immediately got canceled. So my calendar cleared out. And basically I went from like a super booked 2 or 3 months to literally nothing to do. And there was like a week where I was like, yay, I can breathe again. And then there was that like immediate panic of like, how the heck am I going to survive?
Mm-hmm.
And, did some soul searching and was like, well, I know I've got some connections to local businesses that are still functioning. Maybe I go back to just serving more direct to client people and do that and ride this thing out. Because I don't know when DP work's coming back. And so I started doing that, and it ended up being the most financially and emotionally and creatively successful year I think that I've ever had. And most of that was through running a video business instead of being a freelance cinematographer. And so going into 2021, it was sort of this sense of like, there's some trickling of DP work coming back in, but going like, okay, I think I'd really like to double down on this. And so I've been doing a lot of work just to figure out what I really want that to look like, how to avoid the mistakes I've made in the past, how to avoid the mistakes that I've felt working for a lot of different agencies and production companies, and go, okay, I've felt the short end of the stick the client gets, I've felt the short end of the stick the contractors get. Like, how would this system work if you wanted to do it in a way that really respected and treated everyone well? And so that's sort of where I'm at now. It's like we're still doing work, but I'm in the process of sort of really defining what we call it. In my head right now, it's really more of an agency that happens to be really good at video execution than it is like a production company. And I think part of that for me is that, honestly, like I've worked with so many agencies that don't seem to understand basic creative and just hand production companies stuff that doesn't make any sense, and you're like trying to fix it on the day. And so I'd rather be ahead of that point of the curve and have that relationship with the client. And at a certain point, the thing that I've really been, it's hard from an identity perspective when you've always been the guy with the camera, but at a certain point, I'd rather be managing the creative and just let other people execute than be the guy on the ground trying to fix busted creative. So that's a really long answer to the question, but it's still sort of, it's taking shape because it's been a little bit just like follow the money and pay the bills during COVID and serve people in the process. And now it's like, okay, if you were going to do this for 5 years or 10 years, like what would it look like? But yeah, it's been a really good year and I've learned a lot, and super thankful for stuff like what you're doing, and friends and community members who have been really supportive. And it's been a good year in the midst of all the craziness.
That's awesome. Yeah. Thanks for sharing. And that's all the time we've got for today. Thanks for joining us on this. No, I'm just kidding. No, that's really good. I'm curious to know, I feel like when people get in to doing, starting a video company, freelance, whatever they call it, there's this like, huge excitement and passion and just like, people are all in, and I love that part, what we get to do. But the moment for you where you kind of realize like, things weren't going the way that you wanted them to go. And, you tried a few different things. I'm just curious, like what you learned, I don't know if that was a year ago, 2 years ago, whatever, but what you learned that you can help us understand, because I think there are a lot of people that are in that spot that might not be thinking, 2, 3, 5 years down the road. So what pitfall or what was the thing for you that kind of opened your eyes to say like, what the heck am I doing? And maybe you didn't say that, but you definitely had a moment where, it was a significant moment. And what led up to that?
Yeah. I mean, I think the biggest thing, and it's a hard thing to talk about in our industry because I think it's very countercultural to a lot of like the social media culture and the things people want to say on, Facebook groups. And I appreciate, because I think, it's something I've seen you push back on even, is there's always this idea of like bigger and better. And I want Nike, I want an Alexa, I want $100,000 budget, I want Instagram followers. And it's all very like ego and identity based work. Or, I want to make more money. And so there was basically, the biggest moment I can remember is, I owned an Ari Amira and a bunch of equipment. I was flying all over the country and the world, and I had just done like 4 travel jobs back to back. I had worked on this Apple commercial. I was working on something for Walmart. I had made like $40,000 in a month as like a 24-year-old, which was crazy for me. And I had 10,000 Instagram followers. It was like I checked every box basically of like, you got the brands, you got the money, you got the gear, everyone likes you. And I was like basically sitting home alone, like drinking the anxiety away in between jobs. And I didn't have any real friends. I didn't have a good relationship with my wife. I hadn't dealt with a lot of my own, personal trauma from earlier in my life. And it was just this sense of, for me, really, it was like trying to feel better about myself by just like putting notches in the belt. And I like had enough notches in the belt that I didn't even know where to go next. And it was like, I still don't feel good about any of this. And so really going like, okay, if I'm willing to accept that like the gear doesn't matter and the client logo doesn't matter, and like this being the sexiest thing doesn't matter, can I reapproach this and separate sort of my work goals as far as, I want to pay the bills, I want to do this, and there's upsides to doing this, and then my creative goals, and go, I like making stuff, and those things don't have to overlap. I don't have to try to make all my money doing stuff that's super creatively fulfilling. And then put that thing in proper place behind like my personal relationships, my health, because it's the travel, slam iced coffees and breakfast sandwiches life. And that was where I got it. I weighed like 260 pounds. And I just looked in the mirror and I was like, I don't like any of this.
Wow.
And And so really, it's trite to say, but I think it's that thing that's like I had put a lot of things on a pedestal that I think other people told me that I should value, and I got them all and realized that I didn't really care about any of them. It was almost like a moment from a cheesy movie or something. That's just like that moment. And so I think that's the biggest thing for other people that I would say is like really think about what you really want, and Simon Sinek talks about, are you familiar with his thing on the infinite game? Um
That's like is that a newer book that he's got?
yeah, I
I
think it's
have heard
newer.
this. Yeah, I
It's
don't.
fantastic, but he talks about, I won't get super into it, but he basically talks about the difference between like finite games, which are things like baseball that have winners and
Mm,
losers and rules, and things like infinite games. In infinite games, there's no objective. You can't win, and it goes on forever. And so,
okay.
like playing Legos is an infinite game. Being married is an infinite game. Like
Mm,
there's no, and he's like business is an infinite game. There's no winning it. Like,
yeah, yeah.
and when people treat it as something that you're gonna win, you get to the point where you thought you won and then you realize you're no further on in the game. And that was another big light bulb
Mm,
moment for me is like, okay, what if I treated this less like baseball and more like Legos? And instead of going, my end game is I want a million views on YouTube, I want to shoot something for Red Bull, I want to do a national TV thing, I want $1 million budget, I want whatever. I go, what are infinite game type goals that are like, I want to be able to do this and have a lifestyle with my friends and family that I want. I want to be able to make stuff that's creative and, serve people who are doing good things. Like, and once those things started moving, I found that I really liked what I was doing again, and I was a lot less stressed about it. And I have a lot less Instagram followers now. I don't put out a ton of YouTube content. I'm not working on big brands all the time, but like life is better. And so that's, another long answer, but I think that's sort of the biggest change for me in the last few years.
mm. Dude, that's like really powerful. Thank you for sharing that. I didn't want to preface it with like, hey, you don't feel like you need to get like super vulnerable. And I'm like, no, like, I get vulnerable all the time on this show. So I invite you. So thank you. Thanks for going
Yeah,
there.
man.
I think that gives other people permission to feel like, wow, like maybe I have been treating this like a finite game, like that there is. And I remember early on in my career, like that's what it was. It was like in, setting goals and all that stuff. Like there are good parts to that,
Hmm.
definitely that like that can be very healthy. But to your point, to where that's the driver, it's like, like for me last year, oh no, I guess this was like the year before last year. I got to start saying that.
Yeah.
I started taking Fridays off. And for me, I listened to my friend Graham Cochran. He has awesome podcasts for people that have like online courses and whatever. And I met him at the Kajabi conference a couple of years ago and just fell in love with his approach because he's all about like working less so that you can like enjoy life. And I love this work that I do. So it's really hard for me to like not work. I don't ever, the 4-hour work week, like that's not me. I don't desire that. But what I do desire is to like not work on things that I don't care about, things that I feel like are just, I'm not good at, I'm not passionate about. Like, I don't want to spend my time on that. So, if I could only spend, 4 hours a week working on that stuff, and then all the other hours, interviewing people for a podcast, creating content, hosting events, just all of those things, like, yeah, like sign me up. I would work. I wouldn't work on healthy hours. I would work, what makes sense. But like, for me to like have more time with my family, have the freedom to be able to leave work at 4 o'clock, have the freedom and the flexibility to not work on Fridays, to focus on different things on Thursdays, to just be able to like walk away from the business and for the business to keep going. Like for me to have those things, like that's what I want. Early on, I wanted the awards and I wanted the accolades and I wanted the Nike and I wanted like, that's all stuff that I'm like, I heard, people say, and I'm like, oh, that does look sweet. Yeah, we should get that camera. We should do that. Like those were the things that I chased after.
Hmm.
And then, and then there was just a period of time where I knew my long game, what I wanted. I wanted a business that ran and that could run without me. And I realized like, oh my gosh, I'm putting myself at the center of all of those things. So I'm going to be required for all of those things. And I don't want like, if I've got the choice of shooting a Nike commercial or having Fridays off, but like having Fridays off and still making a good living, I'm going to taking Fridays off. or
Right.
having the option. If I want to work on stuff, I can, but I've got that freedom. So I just love that this part of your story, I think, is really powerful. And I think it's going to help a lot of people, see somebody who, I was even thinking, I'm like, what did happen to this super secret? Should I not say the name of the,
Oh no, it doesn't matter.
but what happened to the Facebook group that you created? And to hear the story, I'm like, wow, dude, I love that. It's really powerful because it was, it was a big group and like a lot of people super involved. And, to be able to walk away from something like that, really, it's clear that you had this significant moment in your life where you're like, this stuff doesn't matter. Like, this isn't the stuff that I'm, and again, prefacing saying like, you can have a huge Facebook group and for the right person, that's great. And for the right community, that's perfect. But for you in this moment of time, or in that moment of time, that you didn't need that. That wasn't the thing that was bringing you life and that was helping you in your bigger pursuit. So for you to
Right.
recognize that and to be able to have the courage and the ability to walk away from that, plus the other things, I mean, awesome, dude.
Well, and I think, I think the other thing that comes to mind for me with that is that at the end of the day, if I'm really honest, I think a lot of it came back to me and wanting to have it be about me and wanting it to, all these things. It's like, okay, people are getting something out of this, but it was more about me than anything else. And I think there's a difference between that and like what I see you're doing that like is about serving people. And like, obviously, there's nothing wrong with making money serving people and all that sort of stuff. But I think there's so much presentation. There's like so many of these things that are also honestly shams. That's like, as I got into that world and started to see all the people who were, they're filmmakers you may follow on Instagram who always have these big, crazy equipment things on set. And those guys would come to me and be like, hey, can we rent your Amira for like $200 a day? Because we don't have any money. And I was like, oh, this is fake. This is all a lie. Like, you're not
Wow.
actually, this is not a business. This is just you presenting an image of yourself, or seeing people who are, out reviewing all this equipment and finding out that like all these manufacturers are like giving them equipment for 10% off, and then they're spending weeks making review videos, and it's like everyone looks up to them. It's like, oh, these guys are killing it. And it's like, no, this is not even a good use of time for what you're getting out of it. And all these things that were just, and so then it was funny because I archived the Facebook group. I was out with friends one night and I was like, man, I think I'm done with all of this. And they were like, you should just do it. Archived it. And I basically started getting like internet death threats from people, which was a really interesting, like, no one actually threatened to kill me, but I had like people who were like, I'm going to make sure you never work again. And we're going to make sure that you get bad referrals. And how dare you do this? And and then like, so another thing I did was I went through and I found a bot that just like unfollowed everyone on Instagram, because I was like following 10,000 people, and I was like, I just need to clear my feed, start over, cleared it. And I started getting DMs from like random people, which is, again, like, I respect that like people appreciated something, but like I had a kid, I call him a kid, he's probably my age, DM me on Instagram. He's like, man, I can't believe you unfollowed me. Like, I really looked up to you and this is really fucked up. And you, like, how would you do this to me? And I was like, this community that I built around me
Mm.
didn't really care about me. And I didn't care about them as much as I cared. Like, it was a mutually
Yeah.
dysfunctional
Yeah.
thing, that's like all of them wanted what they could get and I wanted what I could get. And that's where it just got really messy. And if I had ever really cared about like serving them, or they had really cared about, like, it was never a mutual thing. And so as it disconnected, it made it a little easier to be like, I'm glad I'm not putting all my stress and energy into you guys right now, because there's nothing here. And so when I went back and was like, okay, I'm going to invest in like my personal friendships and my marriage and people in my community and other filmmakers who I actually interact with and respect, instead of what people on Instagram think of me, that like there was reciprocation there, which was such a better feeling than like trying to chase Instagram likes and YouTube views and whatever else. And so, yeah, I think to what you're saying though, like, that stuff's all well and good. I still like working on big projects. I like doing creative stuff. We've worked on some really cool stuff this year that was like steady cams and Alexa minis. And I'm not saying that you have to, turn into a really boring corporate filmmaker, but I think it's that like that stuff should follow instead of being the goal. And so I even heard this quote from, it was like a professional pitcher, and he was talking about how you can't focus on your stats. You have to focus on consistency. And if you focus on consistency, the stats will follow.
Mm.
And I think that that's a really good mindset, is that like, if you go out there and you're just like, man, I really want this thing, that it validates a lot of like beg, stealing, and borrowing to get that thing. And if you focus on consistency and serving people and growth and playing the long game, that like that stuff will come, but it'll actually be sustainable. Because I've always
Mm.
also seen
Yeah,
tons of
that's
people
good.
like get a big break and they burn themselves out and they don't have systems and they don't really understand their creative process and they're pulling favors on everything, and it blows up in their face because you tried to, you finally got Nike to answer the door and you realize you don't know what the heck you're doing,
Yep.
and that's always the other thing too, that's like, I've
Mm.
really learned to just respect the time it takes in the process. That's like, you're not going to go to the Olympics in 4 years in any sport, so to think that you're going to be like Nike's go-to production company 3 years after you get your first DSLR is just stupid. And it's stupid that people on Facebook are going to sell you how to
Mm.
do that, because that's not how it works.
Yeah.
And if someone was like, here's how to make the Yankees in 3 years, you'd be like, this is a scam. But for some reason, we'll buy it with this sort of stuff. And it's just like, I mean, that's the only other thing in that line of reasoning, I guess, that I would say to someone is like, it's gonna take a long time to be good, really good, and that's okay. Like, go watch a movie you really respect and look at the age of everyone who was important in that and tell me how many of them are like 25 or even 30, and it doesn't happen, and that's just how it works,
Mm.
and like, you can do great work as a young person, you can get
Yep.
good and get big breaks early in your career, but like, it to actually get consistently good in a way that those opportunities come just takes time, and that's fine. So
Yeah.
stop killing yourself trying to like beat time at something you can't beat.
Yeah, that's really rich. For me, that's freeing because, I see, I'm in the space of like, hey, video business, like, I'll help you do this. And I can look at people and be like, oh man, I wish, my audience was that big. And I wish I was, helping that many people. And I wish I was able to, it's like, it's being consistent. Like, I love that. And I've found a lot of fulfillment in what I've been able to do. So as soon as my mind and, heart kind of go in the space of like, oh, I just wish we could be doing that, I quickly realize like, no, man, like this is good. And if it blows up, cool, like great, whatever. But in the meantime, I'm just going to, do what I can to. So as filmmakers, as, video business owners, to put on that mindset of like, yes, have goals, but what you should be most focused on, in my opinion, is sustainability, so that, exactly like what Evan's saying, like you're in this for the long game, like the decisions, the things, the opportunities you're getting today, you're kind of building this foundation so that you can have, a repeatable process or things to fall back on, so that you kind of grow and your business can be something that lasts for 5 or 10 or 15 years, instead of, and I've seen so many businesses that start, oh, hey, I'm launching this video company, and, and they charge $500, $1,000, $2,000. And that's fine. When you start, charge like dirt cheap, nothing. But at some point, you have to be able to pay for new equipment. You have to be able to pay for, if you need help, and you can't do that if you're charging $1,000 for your job. So it's like this. You have to. We all start at that spot where we don't charge enough, but eventually we have to graduate as our skill improves, even just a little bit, as our equipment changes. We just need to be charging more and more and valuing what we have to offer, so that if you really care about this work and the opportunity to be able to create some freedom and some choice for your own life, like you've got to be able to charge more and have something that's sustainable. And a lot of us just like, oh yeah, it'd be sweet to be able to shoot, for Nike and whatever. You can have an incredibly amazing living partnering with an agency, doing some cool projects for, brands that nobody's ever heard of, creative
Right.
work, financially viable opportunities. In, kind of like what you're saying, Evan, it's like, do you care more about, people seeing your work and being like, oh my gosh, you're amazing? Or do you care more about having a business where you've got some freedom and flexibility and you're able to do things that you wouldn't normally be able to do? I mean, if you're doing work for Nike, like you probably don't have much of a life because it's probably been given to Nike. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I don't know what I'm saying because I've never done work for Nike.
No, I think you're right. I think there's a lot of soul selling that goes on, not necessarily even at that level, but in the process to get to that level, or at least to get to that level too quickly. That's like the people who are really over hustling, over grinding, are just sort of burning themselves and everyone else out. And I think that's the other thing that's like something I would say, just as someone who maybe has experienced a little more of that world than some of the listeners, is like there's nothing worse than working on a $250,000 commercial campaign that the agency and the client butcher and post every time, and you don't want to show anyone any piece of it. And that was another part that like that happened so many times. I worked on this big, I'll say what it's for. I worked on this Walmart thing that was like the whole time the director and I were just like, oh my gosh. Like, and to keep doing that, and you're like, this is what we're supposed to want. Like, I'd rather go shoot a music video for $500 with my friends with the gear that I all own from having done more corporate stuff that we have control over, that we can make the way we want, that no one's going to butcher, than be like, we're going to go bend over backwards for some big brand who doesn't know what they're doing to just like mangle stuff. And the amount of, I mean, go listen to any podcast that interviews like cinematographers and directors, and they're all like, you get 1 or 2 good projects a year that you're willing to show people. And so it's like your success rate of like stuff that's actually good, in my experience, is often higher doing smaller stuff than it is the bigger stuff. That it's like, I used to do a lot of work with colleges earlier on in my career, and it was like I'm really proud of just about everything we made there, and like the number of 6-figure jobs that I've done that I actually want to show people is like very low. And so there's a difference just there too. That's like, do you want to make stuff that's good, or do you want to make stuff that sounds good to tell people about and never show anyone? You know, because I think that's the way a lot of that can end up going too. And it's like I didn't get into this to like be able to see my family at Christmas and then be like, where have you flown to and what brands have you been working with, and be like, oh, I'll chill it and I hate all the work, you know. Like I got into this to make cool stuff. And so like I'd rather, one of the most fun things I worked on last year, and most profitable, enjoyable, like all around things that I worked on, is a series of training videos for a trash company. And like they're looking to create a whole training curriculum for all of their drivers and employees, and it's like in a lot of levels theoretically creatively unsexy, but it's like a massive project for a ton of employees, and there's a budget to make it really, you know, as cool as it can be. And we've got to like set stuff on fire, and like there's all sorts of cool stuff that comes with it. And that's been way more fulfilling than so many of the big brand things I worked on. And it's something that like I didn't have to bid against anyone on, because no one's even looking to do that work, you know. And so that's another thing that I've really been looking at, is like, who are the people who have needs that you could serve really well that no one's banging down the door of? Because everyone's banging down the door of every freaking CrossFit gym and coffee shop and clothing boutique that has no money to make the same piece that everyone else is making for those 4 businesses. And it's like, you know, there's a lot of businesses that do really well, that have things they need to communicate, that are glad to pay for it, that you don't have to sell them that hard. And like, let's just do that instead of all trying to shoot spec Nike stuff all the time, you know?
Oh yeah, that's funny. You forgot microbreweries too. That's the
microbreweries. Yeah, that's another big one. And it's all the same crap, honestly. It's like that's one of the things that I always tell people who ask me about spec work, is like, there's nothing compelling about your ability to make a bad Nike ad and put their logo on it. Because that's all Nike spec work is like, oh, look, a friend of mine who's an executive producer for an agency a while back looked at my reel, and we had done this piece very early on in my career that was for a watch company doing a collaboration with Lamborghini. And it was like, oh, expensive watches, Lamborghinis. We got to like strap some cameras to an Aventador and stuff. And he was like, you need to take that out, because all it looks like is bad watch and car work. And like anyone who actually has watch and car companies knows that that's not how you're supposed to do it. And so you need to stop. Like, you're better off making really good trash videos for the budget you've got than making bad stuff that's normally done really well. Or it's like, if you look at like product stuff, like whenever you see like a badly done product shot, you're like, you don't really know how to do this. And I think that's another thing, is like, you're better off making a killer video for your like local sports team or local college's sports team than like getting some urban people to run around a city and put a Nike logo on it, because all it looks like is a bad Nike ad instead of a killer college sports ad, you know?
Yes. And what I think we forget about that for the small college, you can make something that's really, really cool for them. And that can actually be more fulfilling and make a bigger impact than the Nike dream. And not if you
Yeah.
have the Nike dream, I don't think either one of us are saying don't have that dream, but at the same time, like, don't let that be the one thing, right? Don't let that be your number one thing.
Yeah. And
We've got to wrap up here in a minute, but I just wanted to find out, Evan, we could talk for a long time, and I'm like,
sure.
I don't want to stop, but we need to stop. In your pursuit, right? You've shifted directions. You've made some significant changes in the way that you even are talking about how you call yourself. Used to be freelancer, DP. Now you're like, well, like I'm like a business owner, like I have a video business, or I don't know exactly how you say it, but what has been like maybe the biggest transformation or even some of the results that you're experiencing because of this shift of how you're thinking and approaching the work that you're doing, and what you're calling it or whatever?
Yeah, I mean, so in full disclosure, like I was just on a call today about a commercial DP job in the next few weeks. So like I haven't totally shut the door to that, but I'm definitely sort of switching how I'm presenting myself. And I think, what I've found is that there's a lot that comes on the table when I stop narrowing my identity quite so hard. And I think that my identity previously was like, how can I make money holding a camera? Um, and so when I sort of went, how can I serve people who have ideas they need to communicate? And like, what are the best ways to do that? That now a lot of stuff comes on the table. And now, instead of feeling the tension of going like, well, because of the way I like to work, this is my rate and this is the gear that I want to use and whatever. So I need a base budget of this. It's like, we could do some really great creative and get paid for that. And then like, it doesn't need to be a super high level execution necessarily. And you send that out, get it done, clients happy, and that those projects that in the past I would have been like, no, it's below me. Because when I'm only thinking about the production of it, doesn't seem worth doing. It's like, well, if I can make the figuring it out worth doing, then I can get other people to take care of some of that other stuff, which gives me now a much broader swath of, I'm not just targeting people who have 30 grand to spend on a deliverable.
Right.
We can talk about people who have monthly needs for YouTube channels. We can talk about people who don't really have a good sense of their brand strategy, people who don't understand their why or their customer's story, and I think that's something that when you start doing a lot of that work, and that's another big thing that I would say is just like, I feel like I've had this huge realization that so many people in this industry don't actually do their homework on all the stuff that surrounds it. And so it's like they know sort of gut wise how to like make a good video, but what do you really know about like copywriting and branding and communication and business and brand strategy and all this stuff? Because if you don't, you just come in and you're trying to like throw creative ideas at the wall. And I feel like my experience has been that that's really hard to sell. But when I go and like read a bunch of theoretically boring business books and brand strategy books and how to write ads and like learn what actually makes stuff compelling and learn about screenwriting, that I can go into a room and command that room with confidence in a way that's like, let's look at your numbers, let's look at what you're spending on marketing, let's look at all these things. And now I can have a really articulate conversation that I've personally found I don't get out pitched anymore, whereas before it was like, who can come up with the craziest idea for the cheapest? And that when you actually can do your own homework and learn all that stuff that other people aren't learning, there's a lot of work to be had pitching against people who are like, here's our crazy way to use a gimbal to capture your product in a new fun way. And the CEO's like, I don't care. That's not compelling, And so instead of going like, how can I sell Alexas and bigger crews and more lights? It's like, do your homework on the quote unquote boring stuff, because there's even a lot of big agencies that aren't good at that stuff. And you would be surprised how many big conversations you can win just by knowing your stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, dude, I love that. That is really, really good. I feel like maybe you should be the host of this podcast.
Hey,
Get your bring your podcast back. I love the idea of there. I love business in like, you know, if I had to pick, you know, creative or business, I'm like, I could talk business like all the time. So that's where I land. But I use words today that I never used before, like, what's your ROI, or call to action, like just things that like maybe sound corporate-y or marketing-y or whatever. You don't have to learn a ton of things to know what kind of value or even how you could push back on a client's idea. Because if the client has this great idea, this brilliant idea for their piece, and you're like, you know what, you guys told me the success for this project would be that, you'd get more people signing up for your email, but never in the video does anybody ask you to sign up, or at the end of the video, there's no graphic that says, you should sign up here, or there's no incentive, or you don't have to know a lot to say like, hey, this might be a good idea. So I think my personal thought is that if you can learn some very basic things about business and about copywriting, like you're suggesting, or, think about the ads that you see and which ones draw your attention and why do you think that is, and start like, letting that be your differentiator versus, oh, well, we've got an Alexa versus, an iPhone, and that's why somebody should hire us. Not everybody, some agencies are going to be like, oh yeah, for sure. But the majority of people that are going to hire you for this kind of work, they're not going to know or care. They right. need to know what's in it for us. Are we going to make more money because of this? Is our audience going to grow? Like, are we going to have the impact that we're going to have because you're using that camera, or is it something else? So, right. And I would say it's probably in most cases, it's the something else. So totally. Thanks for that, Evan. What encouragement, what's final thought you can leave us with today?
I think the most valuable thing that I've done in the last month is read a lot. So I would definitely recommend, obviously, I love this podcast. I love some of the other podcasts that are out there, but like take the time to pick up some books. Story Brand by Donald Miller is an easy one if you just need an into some of these concepts. Start with Why by Simon Sinek is really good. The Infinite Game is really good. Brand is a 4-letter word. I forget who the author is on that, but it's really good. It's actually it's one of the most fundamentally like mindset shifting things to how I look at creative for businesses in general. And I think that's one of those things too, that's like understanding long-term positioning and why people like, the Apples and whoever else that you want to use, the Patagonias have staying power they do. And it's not just off like one-off creative. And so brand is a 4-letter word, is a really good book on sort of like having those conversations with clients on their position and what their target is and what their long-term plan is and how their communication supports that, instead of just how is this deliverable cool. So those are 4 books that I would highly recommend. And it's worth just sort of picking some stuff up and blocking off 20 minutes a day to chip out a chapter or something. And I've found that just a month of doing that has made a huge difference in how I feel about attacking 2021. And I think it could shift a lot of other people's mindsets as well.
I love it. That's great. And if you're taking Instagram followers or, whatever, where can people find you? How can they connect with you later on? See what you got going on.
Yeah, so I'm still working on sort of figuring out what the like production company agency side of things is, but my personal website where you can see a lot of my work is eBourcier.com. It's a pain to spell, so there's probably a link in the description or something you can click on, but that's also my Instagram's eBourcier, and it's first initial last name. I'm on Facebook, but not really. I took January off social media, so you can follow me, but you won't see much for now at least. But my website's a good place to find me and has my email on it. And if anyone wants to talk about anything, I am happy to send emails back and forth or hop on a call, and trying to be better about that. It's another little thing that's like one-on-one, invest in actual one-on-one communication instead of like mass, so I'd rather be on the phone with someone for 20 minutes than like DM them back and forth for weeks.
I love it. Evan, thanks so much, brother. I really appreciate you. I love your story. Keep sharing it. Thank you for encouraging us with it today, and hopefully we'll talk again real soon.
Yeah, man. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks for hanging out on this episode. I would love to hear from you. What is your big takeaway from this episode? Maybe something that Evan said that made you think like, I should do that, or maybe I should do something else. How have you pivoted over the last year? Leave a comment, let us know. I want to invite you to become part of the conversation. Thank you again for being here. And don't forget about the 5-day Grow Your Video Business Challenge. You can get more information at studiosherpas.com/challenge. Hope to see you inside of the challenge. And if not, or irregardless, that's not really a word, is it? Irregardless. I will see you on the next episode. Back when I started my video company, stock footage, it used to be the worst. It was terrible quality, super cheesy shots, and really small selection, and it was really expensive. That is not the case with Storyblocks. They offer affordable subscription plans to their enormous library of stock footage, and with their unlimited access plan, you get access to the whole library, including HD and 4K footage. They've got After Effects and Premiere Pro templates, music, images, sound effects, and more. Seriously, there is tons. There have been so many projects where our team just needed one extra shot. You know, maybe the day after the shoot, the client was like, hey, this would have been a great thing to get. And we're like, ah. Or in post-production, they're like, hey, you know what would be a really cool shot? We've saved our clients and ourselves a ton of money and headaches and heartaches. And we've saved a couple of projects that just needed that one special shot with our Storyblocks subscription. Head over to storyblocks.com/studiosherpas to help you create more video with their affordable subscriptions.